Political affiliation in the United States today is no longer just about supporting candidates and policies. It has become a key part of how Americans see themselves. This presentation explores how group political membership shapes self-identity and influences behavior in U.S. adult citizens. As adults, we often build our self-concept around roles like our jobs, our families, our religious beliefs. But increasingly, political identity plays a powerful role too. Unlike more temporary affiliations like school clubs or hobbies, political identity is often passed down through generations and becomes more intense over time. The friends people have, the media they consume, and the networks they build all reinforce those identities. By drawing on social identity theory and other psychological frameworks, I'll explore how these forces drive favoritism, hostility, and moral bias, and what we can do to counteract them. To understand how political identity becomes central within someone's self-image, we need to look at social identity theory developed by Henry Tajfel and John Turner. Their model explains group identity formation in 3 stages: social categorization, social identification, and social comparison. Each stage plays a crucial role in how group affiliation shapes our sense of self and behavior. In the first stage, social categorization, the basic habit of sorting people into groups simplifies our social world. In politics, this means seeing others as Democrats or Republicans, labels which start to carry emotional weight. In the US, this process begins early in life, often influenced by family and reinforced by media. Political identity becomes a shortcut for deciding who belongs in our social group and who doesn't. The second stage, social identification, is where group membership becomes internalized. People don't just support a political party, they adopt its values and beliefs as their own. These beliefs offer guidance on what's moral, what's patriotic, and what it means to be a good citizen. Party membership boosts self-esteem by providing a sense of belonging and pride. Aligning with a party feels like taking a moral stance. The third stage, social comparison, is where people compare their group to others, usually in a way that favors their party. This bias leads to individuals overlooking or justifying unethical behavior from their own party while condemning the same actions of the opposition. For example, both Democrats and Republicans have shown tolerance for scandals in their own party, but express outrage when the other side is involved. There are other psychological theories that help explain why this identity becomes so powerful. Terror management theory shows how people cling more tightly to group identities when they feel threatened. Uncertainty identity theory echoes this, showing how fear and instability push people to seek security in group membership. These processes show how political identity isn't just a label. It's a deep emotional structure which shapes how people think, feel, and act. Terror management theory, developed by Greenberg and colleagues in 1986, explains that when people are reminded by their mortality or face existential threats, they respond by clinging more tightly to their group identities and worldviews. In the US, political parties have often stepped into that role, offering a sense of protection, certainty, and belonging. We've seen this pattern throughout American history. After the September 11th attacks, President George W. Bush's approval rating soared because he projected confidence and offered a sense of control in the face of fear. More recently, during the COVID-19 pandemic, leaders who gave simple, emotionally compelling explanations gained intense support even when their claims weren't grounded in fact. And in times of financial crisis, people are more likely to support extreme solutions or authoritarian leadership styles, thinking that those leaders appear capable of restoring stability. Uncertainty identity theory, developed by Michael Hogg, further shows how people respond to unpredictability by seeking out strong group identities to provide structure. Political parties offer a shared worldview and rituals like voting and rallies. When the world feels chaotic, these things become even more appealing. That's why we often see polarization spike during periods of instability. In times of crisis, the desire for certainty and protection can overtake the willingness to compromise, respect norms, or tolerate difference. That's why understanding these psychological forces is so important in the current political climate. Political identity isn't just shaped by fear, it's also shaped by a powerful social pressure to conform. Solomon Asch's classic 1951 experiment reveals how easily people change their behavior to match group norms, even when the group is clearly wrong. In that study, participants agreed with obviously incorrect answers just because everyone else did. The instinct to conform helps explain why so many people today stick to their party's talking points even when those views contradict their personal beliefs or observable facts. Political parties frequently shift their stances on issues like government spending or foreign policy depending on whether or not they're in power. Instead of party members pushing back on the reversal, many people change their opinions to remain aligned with their party. It's not always about conviction. It's often about belonging. Asch's work reminds us that group loyalty can override logic, consistency, and even what we see with our own eyes. To dig deeper into this, we can look at the difference between normative and informational social influence. Normative influence is about fitting in. It's about saying what your group wants to hear to gain approval or avoid rejection. Informational influence, on the other hand, is when people assume the group has better knowledge. In politics, both consistently arise. A member might repeat a party's message just to avoid social friction. Others might genuinely believe that their group's leaders or media outlets know better than outside experts. Asch's theory of planned behavior adds another layer. It says people's actions are driven by what they think is expected of them and how much control they believe they have. If someone thinks their party expects public loyalty, like going to rallies or sharing political posts, they're more likely to do it. But if silence feels safer, they'll disengage, even if they care deeply about the issue. In both cases, the behavior isn't purely about beliefs, it's about group expectations. Put together, these theories show how conformity, pressure, and imitation work together to keep people aligned with their political group, even when that alignment goes against their personally held beliefs. Social learning theory, developed by Albert Bandura, explains how people learn by watching others, especially when those behaviors are rewarded. In politics, this means that adults learn how to behave politically by observing peers, leaders, and media figures. Political identity isn't just about belief, it's about imitation. People adopt behaviors that appear to signal loyalty and provide a sense of belonging. In polarized environments, this process encourages extreme behavior. When political leaders use personal attacks or inflammatory rhetoric and are rewarded with applause, media coverage, and campaign donations, their followers take notice. These behaviors become normalized. Supporters start to see hostility as strength, and even unethical behavior becomes acceptable if it's modeled by someone they trust. Polarization shifts social expectations. It teaches people that attacking political opponents is not only allowed but celebrated, and unwavering loyalty to the party is the price of inclusion in the group. People actively choose which behaviors to adopt based on what they see being rewarded. If confrontation gets attention and approval, while moderation is ignored or punished, then confrontation becomes the norm. Over time, these patterns shape how individuals talk about politics and how they understand their role within political communities. People learn what good participation looks like, often through repetition, imitation, and social cues. Self-determination theory adds depth to this understanding. Deci and Ryan's theory highlights how much people need to feel connected and valued. That need for relatedness can override other values even when it leads people to support behaviors they once rejected. Someone might rationalize spreading misinformation or defending corruption if it means staying connected to their group. The emotional pull of belonging can overpower independent judgment. Even when individuals who value independence may shift their views just to stay in good standing with their political group, the pull of loyalty can be strong, especially when social acceptance feels conditional. A person who believes in civility might defend a leader's inflammatory rhetoric if that leader belongs to their party. Others might excuse institutional violations because they believe the group's success depends on it. These behaviors don't develop all at once. They build over time through exposure to party messaging and are reinforced by group approval. When someone's personal values don't align with the group, it creates internal discomfort. Festinger calls this cognitive dissonance. Rather than confront the conflict, people tend to rationalize their behavior to avoid social fallout. They tell themselves the group is still right, but every time they do, it becomes harder to think independently. Polarized political groups often reward loyalty and punish dissent. Criticism or exclusion can follow when someone questions the group's stance. These social dynamics make it hard to push back, even when something feels wrong. When approval from the group becomes the main motivator, internal personal convictions start to fade. People may stop thinking critically about political claims and instead respond automatically to whatever the group signals. Reflex replaces reasoning. Over time, political behavior becomes less about principles and more about maintaining status within the group. This shift damages political discourse. Honest debate is replaced by performance. Instead of asking, "What do I think?" people ask, "What does my group expect me to say?" Political identity begins to overshadow independent thought. That's a problem because democracy depends on a populace who can evaluate arguments and make decisions for themselves. Now, being part of a political group isn't inherently negative. Belonging gives people meaning and direction. But when social validation is tied to strict conformity, polarization increases. Disagreement becomes dangerous. People stop engaging with different views, and echo chambers become the norm. This changes more than just voting patterns. It changes how people see each other and how they see themselves. Politics becomes personal, and those who disagree are no longer fellow citizens with opposing views. They become outsiders. While political identity can deepen division, polarization isn't inevitable. Psychological and structural interventions can reduce bias and foster democratic behavior. These strategies address how individuals think and how institutions shape political behavior, paving the way for collaboration and reform. One key approach is cultivating self-complexity. This means defining yourself through multiple roles: parent, friend, employee, and political party member, rather than just Republican or Democrat first. By broadening our sense of self, we reduce the dominance of political identities and open the door to compromise. Seeing others as multifaceted human beings helps us find common ground, which in turn reduces effective polarization and the dehumanization of political opponents. Media literacy also plays a crucial role in combating polarization. When individuals can recognize misinformation and critically evaluate sources, they're less likely to fall into the trap of confirmation bias and selective exposure. Teaching these skills, along with reinforcing civic reasoning and education, strengthens democratic behavior. Bias isn't permanent. It can be addressed. Combining psychological insights with systemic interventions provides a path towards reducing polarization and restoring democratic culture and discourse in the U.S. Political group membership shapes identity through psychological mechanisms like social identity, in-group favoritism, and affective polarization. It has become a primary way Americans define themselves and each other. This transformation distorts moral judgment, intensifies division, and weakens democratic norms. As partisanship deepens, individuals begin to rationalize the tolerance of in-group scandals, dismiss opposing views, and undermine democratic procedures, all in the name of group loyalty. Party identity starts to overshadow civic values, leading to diminished cooperation and accountability. Motivated reasoning and peer pressure often result in individuals conforming to group behavior, even when those behaviors conflict with personal values or democratic principles. In the end, we see increased national division and the erosion of trust, fairness, and responsible democratic behavior. Given that group membership can shape attitudes towards rule enforcement and tolerance of political violence, altering the group dynamic becomes crucial for supporting a healthy democracy. Promoting media literacy and emphasizing shared national goals are key strategies in reframing political discourse. This shift encourages people to view politics as a form of civic participation rather than a battleground of political warfare. By focusing on these interventions, we can foster a more constructive and collaborative political environment.